Good morning. The committee will come to order. And now I want to welcome Secretary McDonough to review the VA budget request for 25 and 26. And I want to let everyone know that we're expected to recess about 10:30 for the Japanese Prime Minister to address the joint session. And then we'll resume the hearing after that. But I want to thank all the witnesses for their patience when we're dealing with this situation. So I want to get right to it. So, the President's request, $369 billion for the VA fiscal year 2025. Now that's nearly 10% increase from this year. In March, Congress already appropriated the vast majority of the 2025 funding, or $295 billion. In June of last year, Congress already appropriated $24.5 billion for Toxic Exposure Fund for 2025. So, we are here today considering the remaining VA account for 2025 and the advance request for 2026. Congress has always, I want to say this real clear, Congress has always prioritized veterans and met VA needs. In fact, for the most part, the department already has received their funding for FY 2025. And I don't want to hear any more baseline rumors and scare tactics about Congress cutting off support for veterans like we heard last year. It is disrespectful to the men and women who have served our great nation to spread lies in an attempt to score political points. And we won't do it. We can't. I want to have a serious conversation about how VA is managing their taxpayer dollars that Congress provides. There is a real problem here. Somehow, despite the nearly $17 billion increase this year and $33 billion requested for next year, the second largest federal agency can barely keep its lights on. Hiring has been cut back or frozen. The healthcare workforce is shrinking by 10,000 positions. Construction to modernize the VA facilities has flatlined to only 2 major projects. IT investments have been cut by 99%. Some existing projects barely have enough funding to continue, and new projects are off the table. The White House seems to be shortchanging many of the priorities that President Biden presents in his own budget, and many of our priorities as well. The overall request increase is large, but a lot of the money seems to be in the wrong places. The simple explanation is that VA used the enhanced pay authority that Congress provided in the PACT Act and elsewhere to spend themselves into a deficit. In many VA offices, they can no longer afford the employees they have now, much less recruit talented new ones. It is the opposite of what Congress intended when we provided these authorities. I absolutely support the PACT Act, but VA implementation of parts of the law is getting very confusing. We're hearing from some members' offices that the VA medical centers don't even understand the new eligibility criteria for veterans. And the whole VA budget is reliant on gimmicks that get more and more complicated every year. I'm talking about transfers, carryovers, transformation funds, unfunded requirements, doing away with a second bite for health care, and a mandatory construction account that doesn't exist. And yes, despite Congress's intent, VA is using toxic exposure funds as another budget gimmick. They are shifting regular expenses out of the baseline budget, dumping them in the toxic exposure fund. Like it or not, 40% of the toxic exposure funds is community care. The VA budget simply does not have to be this complicated, especially because, unlike the federal agencies, Congress always found ways to provide VA. Prioritize VA. We always have, and I'm confident that we always will. I have faith in the Appropriations Committee to sort out the VA's accounts. We have to do our part too, as the authorizing committee. I want effective programs and realistic estimates. I want the dollars to actually benefit the veterans, family members, and survivors. And we always have to stand guard against growth in the bureaucracy. We have in front of us one of the most confusing VA budgets I've ever seen. Somehow, a 10% overall increase contains a lot of cuts in a lot of different areas that frankly don't make sense. But I am committed to protecting health care and benefits, and I hope we will work together to do that. With that, I want to thank Secretary McDonough and his representatives, and the representatives of DAV, PVA, and VFW, who will also be testifying on the second panel.